Hello, everybody. Welcome to another exciting and adventurous cooking class with Basics Market. My name is Sam Maggi. I'm a culinary mentor and chef with Basics Market, and tonight we're making chili and cornbread. We're featuring our own silver sage ground beef in the chili. It's local, organic, and humanely raised by us on our pastures in Burns, Oregon. The cornbread features lots of our local organic Basics brands, Lulabelle's milk and butter, and Gwendolyn's eggs. If you have any questions tonight, this is a live class, so you're welcome to type them in and we will answer them throughout the class. We'll have someone asking your questions directly to me, and questions, comments are welcomed and encouraged. Let's get started. All right, so tonight I'd like to start with the Cowboy style cast iron cornbread. You can see there's a stampede coming towards us here, so I'm going to try to get this done before they actually catch up. Or maybe they'll get here just in time for the chili and we can utilize some of these beautiful cattle here. So this cornbread, the concept is you have a lot of neat stuff in here. You have, or actually we're going to start with the, let me back up. For the purposes of this class, we're going to start with the chili. So rewind, and the chili, I think if when you're doing this at home, you actually will want to start with the cornbread, because you could make the cornbread in advance of the chili and then it would be all ready to go, or have it in the oven. But for the purposes of this class, we're actually going to start with the chili. So for the chili, you want a good chili pot. So I've got this here, and this is just a nice little stock pot type deal. You could use a big Dutch oven, would work well for this as well. Anything that will hold all your ingredients and that you can put a lid on. And as Julia Child always said, you always want a bigger pot than you think you'll need. And with the chili, I like to have some room for stirring and bubbling and that sort of thing. So I've got my pot here warmed up. I've got it kind of on medium heat to medium high heat. I have 1 pound of ground beef. So this is some of that nice silver sage organic ground beef. Very delicious, really good stuff. So I'm just throwing that in. I'm not using any oil or anything, because we're going to rely on the fat from the beef to give us everything we need to saute the rest of the ingredients in there to cook them up. Okay, so I've got the beef in there, and I'm just whacking it around a little bit, and then I'm going to turn the heat down, because I'm going to go ahead and cut my onions and peppers and garlic and get them in there. So onion, we always want to take off the stem end first, and then we're going to go ahead and cut right through the center of the root end. And this just makes it really easy to peel your onion. And it's all, of course, I always have my compost bowl handy to throw in scraps while I'm cooking. It just makes cleanup a lot easier and keeps everything a little bit organized. And also along those lines, you can see I've got what's called my mise en place here, and that just simply means everything in its place. So I have everything measured out, and it's helpful to do this before you're cooking anything really. If you get the opportunity to measure your ingredients out, then when you get to the actual cooking process, you can just go right through it, right? So I'm going to utilize the claw and proper holding of my knife blade with my thumb and forefinger between the blade and the handle. And I'm just going to slice along the lines, going along the lines that naturally occur in the onion, and then leaving that root end on facilitates the onion not falling apart on me. And then I can just cut right across, and the dice is there already. So this is a nice fine chop, or small dice, we can call this as well. So there's half of that onion, and I'm going to go ahead and toss it in. You can see that the fat from the beef is starting to come off of it and give us something to work with as far as getting these onions and peppers going. So chili is a Tex-Mex dish. Mexican ingredients brought in to Texas, so southern Texas, northern Mexico. And it really was in southern Texas where it caught on. And but these ingredients like the chili, and in here we're also using some chocolate, and are Mexican ingredients that would be native for southern Texas and northern Mexico. And these are ingredients that would have been found, like the chili peppers or grow wild. So you'd be finding these and putting them into the beef. And in the 1800s, chili really started to gain popularity, and around like San Antonio area, there were the chili queens, and they would set up business on the squares and sell chili con carne to people, workers, and it was very popular. Of course, in Texas, there's a debate about the beans in the chili, and this chili we're doing here does include beans. You can make a chili that's just meat and peppers, and often, like with the chili queens, they'd have beans on the side. So you'd maybe have some tortillas, you'd have the chili con carne, and you'd have some beans on the side. But with the cattle drives, right? So we have the cowboys, and they're going through the prairies and so forth, and they you have your chuck wagon, and chili was a staple on the chuck wagon, but they didn't have a lot of beef to eat. So the cooks started bringing in beans to sort of bulk up the chili, and that became this sort of bean and meat style of chili, which, I mean, the benefits are, you can really get a lot more yield inexpensively, and you get a lot of great nutrition from the beans. So, and they taste great, right? So these are all reasons to keep the beans in there. All right, and you can see, hopefully, I didn't go step by step through cutting up that pepper or cleaning it, but we do have videos online. All these classes where we tape and we post them. So there's a whole library of classes at basicsmarket.com, as well as some skills videos like how to clean a pepper, like I just did there. And then we're going to cut this into some small dice also. So just going across it. So I cut it into long strips, and then I'm going across, and that's just a nice way to get a good small dice on there. And then the garlic. So I'm going a little out of order to the recipe. You would put the garlic in next or before the pepper, but it's all going in that pot. That's the beautiful thing about chili. It's all going to end up in the pot sooner or later, right? So garlic, I have it here. I soaked my garlic in a little bit of warm water, and this just helps get that peel off without it being so sticky. So it won't stick to your knife, cutting board, or hands this way. And that's just a nice little trick. It can be in there just for a minute or two, or even just a couple seconds really helps. But if you can soak it for a minute or two, that's ideal. And then with the garlic, we're just going to give it a little mince. So I'm just going to go across it and then chop it up. So chili in the 20s, during like the Roaring 20s, there were chili parlors, and then they were all over in most cities in the United States as the popularity of chili grew. And it really was in it really was in the 20s that chili became widespread, and it was a place. There were these chili parlors, and people would just go and eat chili, and and it was a good, inexpensive meal. And then when the Great Depression hit, it really took off because you could go to a chili parlor, get some chili for inexpensive, and they'd give you free crackers as well. So it's really been a kind of a good staple for keeping people going, and a lot of people were able to get through the Great Depression because of things like the chili parlors. And then after the Great Depression, the chili parlors kind of fell out of favor because we started canning chili, and it cans really well. And there are also these things called chili bricks, where you'd have dehydrated meat and beans and all the spices in a brick, and you could just rehydrate it. And that was something that was actually developed during the Mexican-American War for soldiers to be able to eat the chili. Okay, so it was in the Chicago National Exhibition in the late 1800s that chili really got its national exposure. Okay, so we've got our beef is all browned, our veggies are kind of softened. So now we can go to the next step, which is putting in some of the dry ingredients. So we're going to go ahead and start with some cayenne pepper. So cayenne, I like a little bit of cayenne. I'm always really careful with it because it can get really kind of a sharp heat quickly. So when I'm looking at chilies powders, I like more of something like this, which is the ancho chili. So we have a little cayenne just to give it a bite, because you do want some heat in the chili, right? But here's the ancho chili, which is a nice smoked chili pod, which has been crushed and powdered here. So I'm going to put the ancho chili in, and we're doing 2 tablespoons of the ancho chili. And then we're going to go ahead and put in some cumin. And cumin is always a great addition to a chili. And then coriander. And again, these are Mexican spices, right? And so you can really see this Mexican-American collaboration here. And there we go. And so now it's starting to smell really good, right? And we have some paprika. We're going to go ahead and throw that in there. And the sizzling is beginning. I've got the heat on medium high right now. So now the cocoa powder. So cocoa powder does a lot for the chili. Again, it's a Mexican ingredient. Cocoa powder has been used for thousands of years in Mexico. Like there's evidence of cocoa powder and chocolate being developed like 4,000 years ago in Mexico. And the combination of chili and chocolate is an ancient pairing. And that's like what the Aztecs would drink in their sacred ceremonies, right? Is like hot chocolate with chili. And they get enlightenment and health and all this stuff. And for thousands of years, chocolate has been used medicinally and in all sorts of dishes. And it does go great with the chilies. And what it's going to do here for us is it's really going to highlight our other ingredients. Plain chocolate, this is, of course, is unsweetened cocoa powder. You want to make sure to use unsweetened cocoa powder. And what that does, it just gives us a nice base to highlight everything else. It's going to give a beautiful color and a lovely flavor also. But really, it acts as this sort of base flavor to lift all your other ingredients. So there we have the cayenne, ancho chili powder, cumin, coriander, paprika, and cocoa powder. Now we're going to add a couple cans. I have some tomato sauce here. So here we're just going to throw one 15-ounce can of tomato sauce. If you can use an unsalted tomato product, because that way you have control of your salt. A lot of times, like a can of tomatoes is going to have salt added unless it says unsalted, and that'll just bring your sodium levels up and you lose control of the sodium that way. So, find unsalted. Now we have a can of diced fire roasted tomatoes, and this is just going to add a nice smoky. We have the smoked ancho chili, and then we have a little bit of the smokiness from the fire roasted tomatoes. And so that's our Cowboy fire, right? It gets that in there. Okay, so now the beans. So I've got black beans here. Black beans are a nice pairing. You could use any sort of beans you like, really, or you could use there's the tri-colored beans is kind of fun. But black beans is always a good choice. And this is just 2 cans of 15-ounce cans of black beans. You can, of course, cook your own black beans very easily from dried. It's very economical that way and real easy. Just boil up some beans, right? And if you're doing that, you're going to use 3 cups of cooked black beans. Okay, but I have my 2 cans, which is equal to that 3 cups. I'm going to go ahead and add that into our deal. Okay, so it's starting to look like chili, I think. And now we just have our salt and sugar. So a little salt and sugar, it always is nice for the palate to kind of bounce around on those guys. A little bit of black pepper. This is just a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. And then I have a 1/2 cup of plain beef broth. And that's just to help get things simmering. And then 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar. And so a little bit of acid in a dish like this. Again, you have your cocoa giving you that nice base and lifting flavors. And then that acid is really highlighting those flavors and letting them dance upon your tongue. Okay, so I've got this coming up to a simmer. I'm going to cover it, and I'm going to go ahead and put this on the back burner while I work on the cornbread. And as I mentioned before, and as we got off to kind of a funny start by starting with the cornbread, and at home, I would recommend starting the cornbread, and you could even do the cornbread. You could make that in the morning. You could make it the day before if you want, and have that all ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and put the chili on my back burner here and let it simmer. And so I have that on real low heat in the back. If just let me know, you can type it in if something catches on fire behind me, and I'll appreciate that. Okay, so the cornbread ingredients I have again all measured out here, my mise en place. This here is just some melted butter. So I melted 1/3 cup of the Lulabelle's butter in this little pot here. And then this is a skillet cornbread. So you can imagine those cowboys hanging out around the fire and playing the harmonica and singing all those groovy cowboy songs. And yeah, playing the banjo and all that cowboy stuff, right? Telling tales. And then someone pulls out the old skillet and they're going to cook up some cornbread. So they might have had some stuff laying around. And And so again, with this chuck wagon idea, one thing I came across that was really neat, I thought, was that there'd be these routes, right, with the cattle drives, and the cooks from the chuck wagons would actually plant like onions and different herbs and things along the trail, so that the next year, next season, they could come and harvest that stuff and make their chili and maybe make some, have stuff to put in their cornbread pot. So this is a neat cornbread because it has veggies and it has chilies and it has all kinds of cool stuff in there. So we're going to start by heating up our skillet. And this is a 12-inch skillet, real standard cast iron skillet. And these are great for baking all kinds of stuff. We did a skillet pear cake we've done in this. You can do frittatas are great in this. It's very nice. You can go from the stovetop to the oven easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, and what I like to do here is, and this is a little off recipe, but I go ahead and I just pour all that oil in at once. And then I kind of, this is just easier for me personally, instead of having. And then I just take the stuff that kind of goes towards the side, and you really do want to work that oil all the way around and up the side so you don't get any sticking. But I leave the majority of the oil, or half the oil at least, in the center, because that's going to really, we want to be able to really cook up those veggies and so forth. Okay, so that is one way to do it. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to stick all our veggies in here. So we've already looked at how to cut up an onion, right? And so I've done that. This is half an onion. Throw that in there. And then I've got half a cup of frozen corn just right out of the pack, and pop that in there. So cornbread, again, Mexican ingredients. Corn was first cultivated in Mexico like 10,000 years ago. And then Europeans came and put they used it. So cornbread has been around for thousands and thousands of years with Native Americans. But when the Europeans came, they brought some of their European bread making technology and applied it. And so that's kind of, cornbread is again a hybrid of Native and European influence. A pretty neat deal also. Another collaboration, right? So we've got our corn, red pepper, half a red pepper, half a cup of corn, and then a couple jalapenos, which I just diced up here. Nice small dice, give it a little bit of heat. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and let these veggies kind of soften and brown up a little bit. And meanwhile, we can make the batter. So the corn is a type of grass, and most likely it came out of Native Americans playing around with cultivating different grasses and really encouraging that fruit, the corn, to develop the kernels into a food. And it was very important to the Native Americans, and then to people all over the world after it was brought around the world. It was a way to feed people very economically, and it's been a staple, along with rice. Corn is and wheat. Corn is a huge staple around the world. Okay, so I have here my wet ingredients. So I'm going to go ahead and whisk together all my wet ingredients. So I like to put my wet ingredients and dry ingredients in separate bowls and whisk them separately. And that way I make sure everything is incorporated nicely, okay? So the wet ingredients, we have 1 1/4 cups of this. This is a Lulabelle's whole milk. And again, this milk is local to this Portland area. The cows are happy cows. They actually milk themselves. I was just at the dairy and I was able to witness the cows milking themselves. They go up onto this like a merry-go-round, and these robot arms just stick the milking deals onto their udders, and the milk comes out, and they really enjoy it because cows like to get milked because it's a relief, and at the same time they get fed and they get their health checked and all. It's just a really nice deal for those cows, I think. So let's have a look here. We've got the milk, that's the Lulabelle's milk, and here's a couple beautiful Gwendolyn's eggs, and I'm going to go ahead and whisk those in. And then I forgot, here's a little bit of salt. So this is that, I believe it's a 1/8 or so teaspoon of salt that goes on the veggies while they're cooking. So just a nice little pinch of salt there. So milk corn, and then the butter. When I melt butter for some, excuse me, for something like this, I like to let it sit, not so that it comes back to solid state, but let it cool a little bit so you don't cook your eggs. And then you can whisk that right in. So there's the butter, the eggs, the milk, and then I have 2 tablespoons of honey. And, honey would be something you might find on the old cattle drive there. If you're brave enough to stir up the hive of bees and get some honey, and you'd have that in your cornbread. Okay. So this stuff is coming along nicely, looking good. So the jalapenos, I'm coughing because the jalapenos are going right up my nose. Those are good, strong ones. We have a question, yes? Honey, there's definitely there's some schools of thought about sweetened and non-sweetened cornbread. And some people have strong opinions. Honey is a nice mild sweetener. Some people even put sugar in cornbread. So a little bit of honey. I often will have honey on top of my cornbread. Is really nice. Some nice butter and honey. That's good on cornbread. But yes, a little bit of sweetener is common in cornbread. It wasn't always so. I think it's a more recent development to sort of sweeten the cornbread, but it's nice to have a little touch in there. It really complements the corn and all that. But you can definitely, if you don't want to put a sweetener in there, you don't have to use the honey. Okay, so here I have some medium grind corn, and this is from another local Portland company, Bob's Red Mill. And they're really neat because they use stone wheels and they do all stone ground stuff, which really makes a difference in the texture of like flours and meals and all that stuff. So I would highly recommend, and we have these at all our basics market, is the Bob's brand, and this is the medium grind deal here. And then we've got some oat flour. So this cornbread is gluten-free. And so that's a bonus if you're gluten-free or intolerant or have friends and family, they can have this and be happy about it. Okay, so here we have 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and we have 1 1/4 teaspoons of kosher salt. And I always cook with kosher salt. A couple of reasons. It's easy, like if you're pinching and so forth, you can really control the amount. And also you can control the amount of salt in your cooking because it breaks down quicker than like table salt. So you'll taste it immediately, the sodium level, and you can control the sodium better that way. So that was the oat flour going in. And I'm just going to whisk all my dry ingredients together. And this just ensures that the salt and the baking powder really mix evenly throughout the batter, and also the flours are well integrated, right? So we got that. And then I'm going to go ahead and off the heat on my veggies. They're looking great, ready to go here. So I'm going to spread them out evenly in preparation for the batter pouring. Looks like we have another question. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the question is, can you use all-purpose flour instead of oat flour? And yes, all-purpose flour would work here fine. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and dump our flours and meal into the wet ingredients, and using a whisk, get a nice smooth batter. So you can see it's a good loose one, and that's all it takes. And then we'll use a spatula, and we've got our hot skillet here. So I'm going to go ahead and throw my batter onto the skillet, and then I'm going to place it in an oven which is preheated to 375 degrees. So here we go with the batter, and so it will start to sizzle up right away. All right, there's that. And then we can just smooth it over, kind of get an even distribution of batter over your veggies and get them all in there. And then what I like to do is I kind of give it a little, I think the technical word the cowboy talk here is swizzle. Give it a swizzle and get those doggies moving. And the doggies are these vegetables and chilies and stuff. Anyway, so this just gets everything nicely incorporated in there, you know, and just a little bit, and that just helps the veggies kind of rise up into the batter and not just settle down to the bottom. And just a tad like that. And then this will be a little bit warm, so we'll go ahead and use a towel. And then I'm going to place this skillet in my 375 oven. And then after 20 minutes or so, this is the result. I have some nice skillet bread here. That was the fastest 20 minutes ever, right? What happened? Someone will have to tell me later. So I've got some chili back here. So I'm going to bring my chili out, and that should be pretty good to go. You know, again, you want to let your chili go for about 25 minutes or so, and let it get nice and let all those flavors marry. There are some chili folk who will not eat their chili the first day. They let it sit a night to really let the flavors develop. And I know there's some soup people out there that feel the same way. And it is true, like if you ever have a soup you make and eat and then have leftovers, sometimes you find the next day, those flavors are just really integrated the next day. So there's something to that. It looks like we have another question. Yeah, the question is, can you freeze this chili? And yeah, it freezes really well. So yeah, you can just let it cool completely, pack it into like a Tupperware or even a Ziploc bag, and then freeze it, and then just heat it up as you will, and that's a great way to go. All right, so this chili is looking good. So let's go ahead and try this stuff, right? So let's look at what happened with the cornbread first. I'm going to go ahead and cut some nice wedges. I'm excited to see what those vegetables did, right? It should be pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip this over, and you can kind of see the veggies, and it's, you know, it looks good. It looks good. And we can see how the veggies rose to the top and the chilies and stuff. And it's nice, and I mean, it's a golden brown, and it looks like it got a good little crust there. So I'm happy with that. So that's our cornbread. And then there it is, the pale side up too. And so you can go either way with that one. And then we have here the chili. And then this is always my favorite part of the class, where I eat this stuff, right? Okay, so I'm just going to ladle it in. And you can see that all went really quickly. I mean, at home, you probably would give the chili a few more minutes. And of course, the cornbread, it's full 20 minutes or so. But still, quick and easy fixins, as we'd say, right? All right, so here I have chili and cornbread, and let's have a taste test. Yeehaw! That is a-okay. It's great. It's that there's a real richness to this chili. Again, that cocoa powder kind of holding it all together. And we get it. This is not a super spicy chili. It has a good warmth. You can, of course, always kick up the heat by adding more chili powders. Again, be careful with the cayenne, because that's a real potent heat. The ancho is a little mellower, and it gives you more of just that even warmth and the smokiness. There's smoky undertones to it. You got the fire roasted tomatoes. Anyway, really delicious. Good ratio of beef and beans, right? And then the cornbread is super neat, with all that stuff in there. It has a lovely texture, and it really holds up to the chili. It's a nice foil and a nice complement to it. So all in all, delicious. So there we have it, chili and cornbread. Please try these recipes out, or maybe you've been cooking along, and so finish them up and eat them up, move them out, all that stuff. You know, rawhide, right? And we have these classes once a week, nutrition and culinary. Nutritions are usually the first Wednesday of the month, and then we have some culinary classes throughout the month. My next class is on this coming Wednesday, the 20th of October, and it's a sag paneer. It should be a lot of fun. We're going to actually make our own paneer cheese, and then do this traditional Indian dish, or my version of. And please join me for that. It should be enjoyable. And then we've got some hand pies coming up, a nutrition class all about Brussels sprouts, which are coming into season, a real nutrition and flavor powerhouse. And then we're going to start getting into Thanksgiving stuff. So turkey stuff and some vegan and vegetarian Thanksgiving ideas. So please keep coming back to these classes. Look us up online, basicsmarket.com, where you can see all these classes plus skills videos and all our recipe library. We continue to develop and test recipes. And visit all of our basics locations around the Portland area. And it was a pleasure, as always, being here. And so with that, I bid you adieu and happy cooking.